Hi everyone. So this is a comment on the Elwood piece on student voice and students being part of the process of policymaking. I think that one of the interesting things that I want to consider is another way to look at the fact that we do have oftentimes systems and histories of participation in policy dynamics even though when we think that those are not present, right? So we see here, for instance, Lundin and Koch and a tradition of research looking at student voice as part of kind of policy formation and policy organization. Um, and oftentimes when I talk to people, at least in North America, this issue of student doing policy is often dismissed as something that doesn't exist, doesn't take place, and so forth. I think that those of us working in higher education, and for those of you who are participating in some way as students, although as adult students, but also, if you look back at your own practices in K-16 at kind of college level, we see that we have, a history of kind of formalized spaces, but that oftentimes don't have significant impact, right? And I think that this is one of the big issues in terms of policy and the ways in which we deal with processes of policy formation and policy design, which is the process of consultation, and how that process can't be simply a processing name, something that is set up as a protocol that it has to be part of the process, or it can be set up as something that indeed has some teeth, both in terms of it's kind of consultation that is ongoing, that establishes kind of parameters and structures that are systemically organized, and just as important, that establish kind of transparency um, parameter so that we know that the kind of consultation that was done did actually have an impact and was actually used, right, as part of this process. I think it is interesting that we start seeing when we think about, for instance, students, and when they talk about teachers being a conduit for the kinds of information for policy change that they're trying to draw from students, we can see these analogous positions, right, in going up the ladder, so to speak. So we oftentimes have either teacher representatives through the union being the conduit, the proxy, as we say here in North America, to larger issues, or principals, right, heads of school being that conduit, the kind of the leadership. And of course, when we're talking about principals, we have principals having a conduit through superintendents or supervisors. So these kind of hierarchies exist in all kinds of levels, and to simply kind of dismiss them as existing, it's one of the problems, and not acknowledge the importance of the fact that these hierarchies become more transparent and become more constitutional to processes of policymaking is also another element. Thinking about, lastly, about your own project and your cases, I think that those are some interesting questions to ask as well. When we do and when we enter the process of research, obviously what we want is to understand people's voices, either quantitatively, an aggregate voice, or qualitatively a more specific voice. But in what ways, we ourselves facilitate that process of engagement with data. We have the traditions of member checking, but that's oftentimes a very weak part of research procedure, right? So it's interesting to implement and start thinking that these are essentially policy practice processes, but that we have seen them implemented in other sectors of our lives and the ways we interact with people. So I think a big question for your cases, and as you think it through those cases, is a question of constituency, is a question of how do we engage that constituency, what is the value and the manner in which consultation and constituency voice gets actually used? What are the kinds of tools that could be done, that could be used to amplify them? A series of things that are really consequential, and particularly consequential to the people that are involved in that process, that often don't feel that they can articulate their wants, their needs, their challenges, and their vision as well, right? Which is really critical. And I think that this article also talks about that. It's not just about complaining about something, but it's about tapping on the kind of potential vision, which we see also as a theme that cuts across several, if not all, of the readings that you have for this week. Okay, so some food for thought. Think about this issue of constituency. When you look at your case, how is that being done? What is the history of that? How would you approach that? What kind of systems could be in place? What kind of protocols would facilitate? What is your ethical role in that process? Okay, take care.